Welcome, everyone. This has been quite a year, and a happy, healthy new year for all of you. I think after this year, we all need a integrative, holistic psychiatrist. So if you know of any, let me know. But anyway, our topic today is holistic macro solutions to emotional mental health challenges. Everything you need to know in 45 minutes. Anyway, I'm Ron Parks. I'm MPH, MD, and I work in integrative psychiatry, holistic medicine. I'm a consultant, teacher, writer, mentor. I've especially trained in psychiatry, internal medicine, nutrition, preventive medicine, and a graduate from the macrobiotics at the Cushy Institute. Board certified in psychiatry with a master's degree in public health. There's a lot we're going to talk about today. If you're interested, a recent book I published, it's called COVID-19, Mental Health Crisis, Holistic Understanding and Solutions. You can go to my website and get a free copy of that. And also, if you're interested further in any of the information beyond the book, my Mind Wise newsletter, which is my blog and newsletter, it's has articles, and you can get access to that for free also through my website, which is parksmd.com. Anyway, today's talk can be expressed simply as macro thinking keeps us from running into walls. In macro awareness, there are no walls where insight, perspective, and creativity abound. My background is in macro holistic medicine. My mental health career and all that began very early in my life. I had been stricken and placed in a large children's hospital when I was about 9 years old. And I gradually recovered from a non-paralyzing type of polio infection. I was treated at that time with the best science of the day in medicine, but also with natural treatments. And if any of you were of that era, the famous hot bath treatments from Sister McKinney, which meant being wrapped in warm blankets for an hour and physical therapy in a hot water tub. Prior to that, my young life, I grew up in the rural countryside. It was mostly centered around natural things, outdoor activities, romping in the field with my dog, and so on. My mother was very much a spiritual person, and a very big influence on me. Again, one of my stories, which is on my site, is about my experience with polio and how that changed my life. All these experiences influenced my journey into holistic and integrative medicine and psychiatry, where I've always tried to balance the worlds of science, medicine, and natural approaches to help people with medical, psychological, or emotional issues. I first was exposed to macrobiotics when I went to several retreats to study yoga. I've been into yoga for many years. I studied with Yogi Desai. Michio Kushi at that time helped him set up macrobiotics at his yoga centers. My medical work came to embrace both natural and alternative ways, and studies of other cultural philosophies and practices as yoga, which is a big influence, Zen, Buddhism. And I found great value in community service and a healthy lifestyle. Except for now, I got a little bit of a hoarse voice, probably from talking too much. I wanted to highlight the importance of the bigger macro awareness versus the micro narrow thinking or dualistic thinking, as we call it, and their impact on mental and emotional life. I wanted to go from here to a story about 2 Chinese meditation balls, which actually are part of my experience at the Kushi Institute. Then I want to do some discussion, which I hope will be interesting, about this micro macro perspective. And then I want to finish, if hopefully we'll have time, with the macro holistic approach to depression, which is probably depression and anxiety are the biggest things that cross the path of somebody in my type of work. The story, it's called The Chinese Meditation Balls, and I wrote this just for you. It was a freezing wintry afternoon. This is true, by the way. And I was carefully winding down a treacherous mountain road in a car from the Kushi Institute in the Beckett Hills of Western Massachusetts. Maybe many of you have taken that road. There was a sense of urgency as my new friend in the passenger seat of my car, and he was a fellow student at the Institute, was struggling to breathe. We were both in our third level of teacher's training. Prior to coming to the Institute, he had been told of a suspected tumor pressing on his airway. He was in his late 30s and chief of his own restaurant, a very good chef, and he was good to have as a fellow student. And he'd come to learn more about macrobiotics, diet and lifestyle and philosophy. He told me the family he grew up in favored doing everything naturally as possible. There was a distrust in his family, and now a part of his own thinking, that shunned traditional science and medicine and embraced natural alternatives. He knew that I was a physician in my own work in medicine. As we talked, his breathing eased a little, and we both felt a warm bond between us on this urgent journey to the local hospital ER. When we arrived, the ER doctor immediately saw him and sent him for an X-ray. The doctor had the radiologist read the films, and he came back and told us that it appeared it was a treatable cancer, but he would need to go for immediate evaluation and treatment before there was any further progression. He refused, and when he had relaxed some with his breathing, we returned to the Kushi Institute. He was there for another week and seemed to improve some, and decided to return home before the conclusion of the course and his studies with Michio Kushi, the founder of the Institute. My counsel was for my friend to be open-minded and consider the options as it appeared to be treatable cancer with a conventional medical treatment. And I was somewhat familiar with it and knew that this was probably a very responsive cancer, but didn't know definitely. As we had formed a close bond, we exchanged a hug and a gift. Before he left, I thought his gift was a very personal belonging of his. It was a beautiful set of Chinese meditation balls with a painted ceramic coat in the box, decorated with artwork from the Orient. The 2 balls, when rolled in the hand during meditation, made a metallic ball-like ring. When they rolled in the hand, they kept in contact. I kept in contact with him for several months until he died. Can you all see this? I don't know this. Oh, there we go. Yep. It's in a very nice box, and I thought, oh my God, this is an expensive gift. I didn't think to get one myself. Of course, I didn't know he was leaving so precipitously. So anyway, years later, and actually, and this is truth, right before preparing for you all, I took them off the shelf, and then it hit me. What what the gift meant. Rolling them around in my hand, their sweet ring awoke something deeper beyond my present mind. I realized that the giver had gifted me something sacred from his heritage and the sages that conveyed a deep spiritual reminder. I think he and his family were from the Orient, actually. Even when our minds think we have the right meaning, truth, and correct path, the thoughts are still entrapped in limited binary dualistic thought, the type of mental processing that can lead us astray with micro or dualistic thinking, talking about binary thinking, plus or minus, black or white, this or that. It's our judgmental mind state with the logical reasoning, planning, configuring, discerning, and decision-making practicalities. The meditation balls, even in deep meditation, always remind to let go, surrender with complete acceptance, allowing the opening of the gateway to union with all that is beyond the personal limiting thoughts and entrapments. The journey beyond, though temporarily, allows the acceptance of the ordinary mind and its usual dualistic practical thinking. But now with connection and remembrance of the encompassing spiritual dimension of unlimited possibilities and potential beyond the small limitation of personal space and self. Now there is a feeling of being more balanced in flow, a reemergence into the large perspective of life and possibilities. The meditation balls were a reminder to always be aware of the larger perspective of things beyond the narrow figuring planning aspect of our meditation, that it is necessary for taking care of our needs and gratification. I trust that my friend had found the deeper wisdom and knew that his death was imminent and that intervention at this late stage were not what he chose to do. He embraced his fate. He, in his own way, found meaning and purpose in what he was doing and with his natural health ways and heritage. I often wondered if his decision was the right one. Perhaps it wouldn't have been the right one for me, but the truth is probably somewhere in the subtle music emanating from the two separate decorative metallic balls rolling in the hand with their clarion call and alerting sacred ring from the two calling from one solitary unifying note. I always get choked up. The other great teacher for me was the first microbiology professor I had in medical school. I was looking in a microscope and right away I said, I know what that is. That's such and such. He says, breathe and look around, open your mind up. And I did, and there was something, it was something bigger and more important. Again, the copy of this story and others, you can go to my website, parksmd.com. Just some notes, expansion on this. Mental health and well-being, the micro-macro thinking, finding the right understanding and perspective, getting unstuck. And I guess more importantly, we can't get away from one or the other, but the recreating balance in our life is so essential, and probably the essential in mental health and well-being work. Early attention can prevent or reverse potential problems and chronic or degenerative conditions. We all know that, and we all seek to do that. There's no definite answer to how much is the environment, nutrition, sedentary, inactive lifestyle, genetics, toxic exposures we all have, trauma and abuse, lack of nutrition, autoimmune stuff, inflammatory conditions, obesity, hormonal imbalance, and I could go on, but I won't. An experienced and well-trained scientist and macro-oriented physician should have an open mind and consider these things. Too much narrow-minded micro thinking might miss the critical factors underlying an illness, but that thinking might be important to devising a plan and a strategy, which hopefully would be a helpful one. Early recognition and interventions are essential, of course. In autism spectrum disorder, an interest of mine, scientific research has shown that early recognition and intervention as training with appropriate skills like social skills, information processing skills, can make life easier for the child as an adult. In this example, the brain is in its earlier, younger ages of development and has more neuroplasticity, or the ability to form new neural networks and influence behavior and learning. And this is somewhat true with different labeled mental health conditions, which I'll mention later if we get a chance. In severe depression, where an individual is stuck without motivation or finding anything rewarding or gratifying, is moving towards a deep despondency and losing the will to live, where traditional antidepressants and other therapies often don't work or have failed. There's a newer use of psychedelic medications, which have come out of the very indigenous cultures. And in one of the programs I'm involved with, we use ketamine, which brings a quick reversal, at least temporarily, by enhancing neuroplasticity in the brain, we think. The brain's ability to develop new neural networks and shift in thinking patterns. The ketamine approach, of course, works well when it's done in a holistic way, along with targeted psychotherapies, because the person's opening up to help them develop new learning and so on. The use of hallucinogenic drugs came out of, as I said, indigenous cultures. In the integrative programs, one of which we call spiritual emergence, we see some of the same results accomplished with breath work, which is also part of our program. And I mention that because we have a presenter today about breath work. So the bigger point here is that all comes from the macro perspective. First, to be open-minded on the helper end. This helps discover other needs and other factors that may need attention. And I'll mention that if we get to an example about depression. For example, if a person still is in an abusive, traumatic circumstance, it might be the initial focus to get them out of harm's way. A lot of trauma has already occurred. The need is often to get the person into trauma-focused therapy or other work to help them heal or to move on from that. Or remember this, to get unstuck, a critical point here. If a person is being starved, malnourished, as we all know, the biggest help might be to find a way to get them better nutrition or lifestyle modification. If they haven't had purposeful work or activity, or haven't been moving or exercising, there might be a focus on that for therapeutic assistance. And here's a good one. A person has had a life-destructive substance use disorder, as alcoholism or opioid addiction, that might need very early intervention and moving into a support network as something like AA or a substance abuse treatment program. Some of my current work is involved in that as well. Integrative holistic programs are both key and essential, and the focus is in macro tradition of open-minded thinking, moving towards a balance of the analytic, binary, dualistic reasoning, essential part of the brain for planning. And, it gets the practical aspects of stuff done. But this versus the non-dualistic spiritual openness to remain fluid, flexible, and unstruck from the narrow view, opinions, judgments, or reasonings. To find the right key and path for treatment and intervention. And as our story above, it's about finding balance between both of those. And actually, both of those are in a larger macro thing, or as Misha used to talk about, the big cycles of things. This is an interesting point. In a natural holistic way of support and care for the ill or compromised, it's all about removing obstacles or impediments so that the mind, body, and spirit could regain its natural flow and balance. In transpersonal psychology and spiritual emergence work, which I'm involved in, this is a central tenet and the root of modern medicine, to do no harm. As a body, mind, spirit of support and obstacles are removed, the involved self-healing system and nature of the body and spirit can move towards reestablishing health and equilibrium, flow, and well-being. I do embrace these principles, but in a macro way of believing there are also larger systems that are involved beyond the person that are major influence on any healing needs to the person, body, or spirit. The larger influence may involve, for example, the environment, scientific knowledge, its advances, developments, and alternative therapies, practices, and philosophy from the culture and traditions that have preceded us. As the yogis and Buddhists had some very advanced understanding and practices to support the mind's openness and mental health to prevent breakdown and disaster and disease. And probably our first mental health system came from there. How are we doing? Oh, we still have some time, so good.
Yeah, we have, right. And then you want to leave some time if there's questions, you said.
How much time we have? You'll keep me alerted.
Sure. You're doing
Okay.
great.
Okay. So anyway, let me just throw in here that part of my work has always been to serve the people, the public sector, and public health. And there has been a lot of issues and questions to me around vaccines. And I am biased because I'm a polio survivor, and this was before vaccines were present. But I do look at the bigger picture of the world's population and our community, and what our actions might have direct influence and impact on that. It's not the flu that's going around. It's a pretty serious thing. Anyway, I'll pass over that. Macro approaches to depression. This is from a sheet, which I still have to post on my website, but I will for all of you. It's a sort of a summary sheet about depression, mainly about depression and anxiety. So everybody should be aware of the warning symptoms of depression. And this sheet has a long list of them, but I'm just going to say the important ones. Well, they're all important. Loss of one's usual interest in pleasure and doing things, what psychiatrists call, or psychologists, ahedonia. Once one loses that pleasure in things, that's a sign. Feeling down, guilty, helpless, hopeless, and or irritable, pushing people away or not getting along with others. And of course, as this gets major, then you might have a major problem. Change in sleep patterns, not sleeping, getting restful sleep, loss of vitality, energy, poor appetite, or overeating, weight gain, weight loss, and so on. But it's important to early recognize any kind of these difficulties because it can pass into a chronic stage of any of these things, and that can include drug addiction or anything. Because as you know, once a person is into it, and let's say the brain is into it, it is hard to reverse it. It's hard to get the willingness of the person to engage. And I'm sure many of you in your own families have seen this. Early recognition is essential. And, if not in depression, it can progress to a significant debilitating mood-related condition and can lead to loss of life. Reach out, and find help for somebody that as much as you can. And the earlier you do it, the more open they will be. And then learn about it yourself, read information. Unfortunately, many healthcare providers, they more into micro thinking, a little judgmental. That's my micro thinking. They definitely jump to labels and go quickly to medications like tranquilizers, antidepressants, or reassurance. Oh, it's not that bad. And it's mainly because they don't really know the depth and the problems that they haven't really studied it. So again, it's a time when the person might need social support, psychotherapy, complementary approaches, and so on. It's a time for to find qualified, experienced people for sure. Children with depression. I don't know how many of you still have children or young children, but they present with depression much differently. They can be showing temper tantrums, acting out behavior, sleep difficulties, nightmares, decreased interest in things. But anyway, it's important to know these. I used to consult in a adolescent program and I became well aware of these. Key contributions to anxiety or depression and mood disorders can be medical issues, nutritional deficiency, hormone deficiencies, low thyroid, diabetes, heart disease, or obesity. There can be family genetic problems or propensities, such as in bipolar conditions. There can be adverse lifestyle problems, which we're all aware of, beyond nutrition, sedentary habits, chaotic, stressful living, working adverse conditions. Trauma, very important. A lot of mood disorders have an underpinning of trauma, or it can actually be from a traumatic brain injury. Somebody could have impairment from a surgery or an accident they had. Environmental exposure to many different things can be toxic to the brain. Talking about toxic metals, molds, chemicals. The presence of disabilities or poor social adaptive functioning, as we see people on the autism spectrum, which again, an area of interest in, makes one vulnerable to discrimination, rejection, bullying, and trauma. And sometimes they have such major meltdowns, they get diagnosed as bipolar disorder and drugged out and made worse with medications. There can be social factors from anything, from a toxic, abusive relationship, post-divorce, financial problems, and so on. There's a lot of things. It's again a time for getting help. If the person is beginning to talking about not interested in living, or to you feeling like he's suicidal, do call or get in touch with the suicide hotline, 1-800-SUICIDE, or get to a mental health professional who can advise you how you can be helpful. Don't tell them, oh, things will be better tomorrow. Anyway, so what will a comprehensive holistic program include? More on the macro side. It might involve psychotherapy, somatic or spiritual support work, lifestyle modification, life skill enhancement, mind, body, spiritual practice such as yoga, qigong, mindfulness, meditation, exercise, using mindfulness when you're running, swimming, biking, or dance. Now, for instance, at my age, I swim a mile. I do that several times a week, but this hoarse voice is probably that I shouldn't have done it in that freezing weather. Anyway, stress management and relaxation techniques. Well, actually, we all do the best we can. Targeted nutritional therapies, which we know a lot about, educational about dietary choices. And again, it's better to begin that early in life. How many friends and family members have we? And they say, oh, that's very interesting. I say, but they don't change. Medications may also be invaluable in resistant or severe emotional or mental condition, especially when it's life-threatening. And where natural non-medication treatments have not worked. And that's where you need to get to somebody in those, and well studied in that. Antidepressants can be helpful. They don't work too quickly, but in many cases they don't. And there's always the worry about long-term consequences. So anyway, that's it. Do we still have time for questions? Now I only have the answers if you ask the right question, but
there are a few questions here, and I think I'll let anyone who wants to ask just unmute yourself.
If you do, you think of one, you can write me at my blog site or my website. It's ron@parksmd.com. Actually, if you just go to parksmd.com, you'll get to the area where you can ask questions and so on. I see a hand.
Okay.
Go for it.
So all of these things are wonderful with a person who is willing to do them.
Exactly. I'm glad
usually
you
the person that's willing to do them is already healthier. What about a person maybe with personality disorder who refuses to do anything? How do you deal with that on a medical and holistic?
Well, if you're the parent or health or want to be a helper, go to the best resources you can to give you some hints. Like I have a family member, or I shouldn't say, let's just say I know someone who has a family member that has severe alcoholism, and the person at their stage doesn't even know or recognize they have a problem. So I referred the person to some good resources. But the problem was getting them there because they were somewhat of what we call an enabler. So anyway, the other thing comes to mind, have somebody that 3 people that are in dementia. You know, there are, well, they're older life stage like us. And as a person gets into that state, which is similar to what you're talking about, they have no even know that they have a problem. So what I did with these folks is to do what I was taught by one of my mentors, never to give advice, but anyway, I directed them to what I thought were good resources. The ones with Alzheimer's disease, I directed them, or actually one of them told me about it and I directed the other 2. It's a book called The 36-Hour Day, and it was a lifesaver for them that read it. And so now in the case of severe depression, we've been using a sort of integrative approach with resistant depression. But it's been difficult, like you say, because how many people are going to show up to do that? Probably very few. But sometimes the family will some way get them in, and just with a treatment with either intense breath work or with ketamine, or they're using MDMA now, the person sort of goes into, well, with ketamine, it's actually like a dissociative anesthetic. They actually lose that micro thinking. Just it's transient, maybe for an hour or 2, and they sort of come into more of a, well, it's sort of a non-dual spiritual state, and they begin reflecting and become more open-minded. And then by bringing in the therapist at that point, when they are open, or in some cases, it works just coming out of that. It's just like people having an epiphany from a deep spiritual experience. So the solution is you need some Chinese medicine ball. No, I don't know. I have no, what's the word? I get no payback for these. But it does remind me, my friend, I mean, I've had these for 20 plus years, and they mostly sit on my shelf. I thought it was painful when I would take them down, but there was a deep message. He was an important teacher for me. So, any other questions?
Beverly, I see you wanted to ask.
I just asked. Yeah.
Okay, and Susan Barron, you had a question?
Go ahead, Susan, I'm listening.
Is she muted? Susan, we're not.
Yeah,
hearing you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry. My question was just about mental health during the time of COVID. Many
God.
single people
Thank
being
you.
shut in. That's kind of what I thought you were going to talk about today. Just because a lot of people are really feeling it. We feel like, there's a scare and it doesn't go away. Like there's constant sort of something hovering over everyone. Plus,
Right.
to address how some of us, who have chosen not to give backs, or the ones who have chosen to give backs, there's definitely a we and them kind of mentality that has developed. I wonder if you
Yes.
could address that as well.
Yes, most people have begun acting out as children, in rages and doing everything like a child that wants to get negative attention. But the pandemic has brought a real crisis in mental health. There's not the resources or services. They're all being overwhelmed. The amount of suicides, of opioid overdoses, which they don't talk much about, but working in that area have gone up. People are going through, it's interesting, there was an article in the New York Times about languishing, it was called, but it was the point that it's sort of an in-between depression and getting despondent and not being in well-being or a healthful mind state. That's saying it's sort of that in-between where it's neither good nor bad, and it's like you're being dragged down and so on. So it is a time, and a number of articles I've written about this, especially in my book about the pandemic, was to find resources, or if you have a friend that's not resourceful or stuck, or more towards the depression end of that spectrum, find out ways that you might be able to reach out and be helpful and do a lot of things. It's hard for me personally to talk about this because being a writer primarily now and an educator, I love being isolated and going into my creative space, and I'm still able to do most things, but most people are not. They have family, children living at home. They have both husband and wife or single. They're not able to work, which was an important part of their social connection. And social connection is very close to spirituality. It's what you get pulled out of your micro thinking. And we need that to balance our lives. And, just doing virtual things, even like this, don't necessarily do it all. I mean, I remember Gunnar and her husband, the grand time we had on the macrobiotic cruise, and with Lino and Jane and all. I mean, it was a learning, but also the social thing. I mean, and everybody's.
Dr. Parks, we have 3 questions and only 5 minutes.
Okay, let's go for it.
Between Marion and Mike and Devora, which of you has the shorter question? Just go ahead and
And
ask.
if anybody wants to discuss, just email me or write me. Okay.
Very good.
So I just wanted to say to Beverly, I notice when I eat macrobiotically and I'm eating a lot of grains, that I am way more emotionally stable than if I'm eating, say, whiter food or sugar. And so if you're in a position where you can cook for or bring food to the person who you're worried about with depression, that might be helpful. So that's all.
Absolutely. My son's almost, hopefully he's not listening. He's almost 50 now. And I said, for God's sake, I could find a nice macrobiotic partner. I said, he doesn't cook much. But anyway, macrobiotics is again, as you all know, more than nutrition, but it's about all the things. It's about getting in again the macro thinking into the larger perspective and trying to keep a balance so you don't get sucked into just that micro thing. Or somebody was asking, you don't get sucked into the pandemic woes and all that, you know. So it's not just about the nutrition. It's about the lifestyle, about the other things that pull you out of, you know, your narrow-mindedness, or what we're going to call it. So anyway, I wish you all a happy, safe, healthy New Year's, and be mind wise, which is the name of my new newsletter and blog.
Very good.
And hopefully I'll be more mind wise than the next year.
Amen. Amen.
Love you all. Take care.
Thank you
Hope
so
to hear
very
from you.
much. Bye-bye.